Hi, I wanted to talk about something else that I knew. Well, remember I talked about part of that family going down through Africa and going up through Morocco and where they stopped? Well, it might not be exactly where you think they had stopped. And I wanted to talk about, well, slaves in those really early days. It wasn't uncommon to have slaves. And some societies had slaves, and they actually were different than slaves in that they mixed sometimes. They were together at some events and together. And the slave trade in some countries was originally, um, originally they wanted, certain wealthy people wanted slaves, and so they hired local people to enslave their own people, to be honest. And it was lucrative for them. And they thought that they were going to get more money than they actually did. And then it became a business. And a lot of slaves were brought to America. There were some countries that did not participate in slavery. They knew better. But there were countries that participated in selling their own people into slavery. It was different than earlier times because in earlier times, it was actually for a purpose. And people believed in a purpose. And so I think a lot of people called them slaves in the early, not in America, in other countries, they called them slaves. But actually, a lot of people had such strong beliefs that they, and yes, there were some slaves, but a lot of people believed in, and we're talking thousands of years ago, so heavily in what they were doing that they, I'm trying to see them, there were slaves, but a lot, I would say a majority of them were, well, they had a free place to stay and food. And we're not just talking about people slaves, well, and they had animal slaves. And not that animals were considered property then, but they were not. They were brutal to animals. And I think about, I think about the civil rights movement in the United States, and I think about my own family and some of those images with African American, and I would just call them Americans, you know, in the photos that I had, and I did wonder. I was like, what were my grandparents doing back then? I mean, they were in suits and like they were like friends of the family. And it's strange because then, people went back to Liberia, or it was, and there was not a lot of structure in the beginning. And I talked about other areas in Africa, Africa where tribes were fighting each other and killing each other over ridiculous things. And so you can see a pattern here. You can see a pattern of human brutality against each other, and they were the same people. I mean, it happened in Nazi Germany. It happened in Palestine and Israel. It happened in Rwanda. It happened in America. It happened in China. In India. The caste system in India used to be brutal. It was horrible. And that old practice of burning wives with their dead husbands, I said it was outlawed, but I knew it still was practiced in certain villages. I can see, and a lot of times, it wasn't just the men who wanted it, the women demanded it. You know why? They didn't want to have to take care of them. Many times, that's who was left to take care of them is their sisters and their other family members. Otherwise, they just became poor, and they lived really by the rivers. I'm thinking about Africa now. Well, in the images that I saw and the stuff that I know what happened, and not many countries did anything about it. They didn't. Africa didn't do anything about it. You know, they tried. There were some peacekeepers that tried, but peacekeepers at that time were not allowed to interfere. I mean, they did sometimes when they had to protect themselves. And I don't know who you blame in that situation. Much of the fighting was caused by other things. I know that for damn sure. Just like Vietnam, you know, just like a lot of the other wars. So I always wonder sometimes who is to blame in that situation? Are the people fighting to blame? Or are the people not doing anything to stop it to blame? There were some barbaric practices that happened in certain communities, and I won't mention them. I spoke out against them. I spoke out against a lot of stuff. No one listened. Or if they did listen, it was too late. Can you imagine what one voice can do in a world? You know, what one voice can do. You know, and people are like, well, you're not even from here. You know, maybe they're right. You know, I don't know. Maybe they are. But why would I live in a world like that anyways? I guess it, I guess to witness. And that's kind of what I've been my whole life as a witness. A witness to beauty in the world and beautiful people. There's beautiful people in the world. There's some haters in the world too. And it's mainly because they don't see their own inner beauty. And they're always comparing their inner beauty to others. At least that's my take on it, you know. And governments, like I said before, at one time were limited because systems were in place that restrained their hands, and it was difficult to get anything done, you know. I don't know. I told you before that I lived in North Minneapolis too, twice, and I watched those brothers kill each other over stupid things. I witnessed little children being shot at drive-bys for no reason. And then and people complained, why aren't they doing anything? And it's like, you know, if you teach people to hate and to be afraid of the truth, that's how they act. They act out. They act out because some of them knew the truth. Some of them were trying to get the truth out. And it might have been hidden in music. It might have been hidden in movies. Might have been hidden in things that you would not expect. And I kind of look at it too, like, I remember having to lock down the ER because gangs would come into the ER after kids would get shot. And don't think that, bullet holes don't leave these big holes in you. Sometimes they're hardly noticeable. And it was not pretty. And there wasn't a lot that could be done about it at that time. People lived in fear of their own people, fear of other Americans, fear of speaking out against injustice. And then what people did is that since they had so much fear about it, they just went quiet. You know. And men and women weren't very different either. Women were just as violent. And in fact, I witnessed, I don't know. I don't know. And you think about, well, then they had the sex trade selling young children into sex slaves. And, you try to speak out against that. You know, you know. Maybe one day somebody will go there and shed light on the whole thing. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. Maybe they like their lives. Maybe they like the lives that they live with no inner beauty. And all they see is the ugliness in other people because they have no inner light. Maybe that's the problem. And then they are their own worst enemies and they'll destroy themselves. I always thought it was funny that, the people who were causing a lot of the violence were the loudest to speak out against it. Not that I wasn't causing any violence in my time, you know. Not in my life from, 1971 to 2013. I just wonder, though. I wonder. I mean, I could go on and talk about different cultures. I mean, about Russia's. Well, and we call it. You can call it gay this or gay that, or I refer to it as human sexuality. And people are like, well, you have to define it. And it's like, people have sexual desires and instincts and needs and wants. And that's different than classifying somebody as different than another person. It is. And people don't like that. Some people really like black and white. They like things to be either this way or this way. And they can't deal with like that duality or that mentality that within each person or within each being is the capability of being so much more than just their limited perspective. And it is difficult. It's difficult. I had difficulties at times shifting gears between my understanding of human sexuality to my acceptance of sexuality in itself is a broad spectrum. And, you know, men do love each other without having sexual relationships. It's a different type of connection that they have. Like, men can look at each other and just be like, and they're like, I got you, buddy. I got you. You know? Same with women. It's strange that we need, or that people at that time or any time would need to put constraints on something that's kind of natural. And that idea about, you know, well, love, LOVE. Tired of you guys' language barriers. Um, it's, you know, it's not easy. And some laugh at Steven, well, they're just using you. And I'm like, fine, fine. I know what happens, though, in the long run about that. In the court of fools, you know, they might as well be playing basketball right now. It's funny, too, when I was thinking about relationships that I've had in my life and how difficult it was for me to see color, like see skin color as an issue. And to be honest, I was attracted to certain people, but it might surprise you to know that it wasn't so much what was on the outside as it was what was on the inside, or what was a potential for being on the inside of their spirit, or I don't know. So, I don't know. It's kind of, it's weird thinking about what, I should erase this, hold on. I'll just leave it. Um, yeah. I know a lot of people like to hide behind words because it gives them safety, you know? And I mean, this might be all neither here nor there. It would be, though, interesting. I always wonder those people who are so anti things, anti this or anti that, those are the people that I think end up coming back in another lifetime and experience it. And then they're like, and they don't have any knowledge of it until later in life. And then they're like, what have I done? Or what did they do? In their past lives. And so, I don't know, it's just food for thought or something to think about. And I do, I wonder. And at one time, I said children need to grow up, you know, and they need to like realize, you know, that things aren't always easy. Um, I don't know. It isn't always easy. And looking at experience not just from one point in time, but looking at the whole picture of experience, it's hard to do that. It's hard, well, and it's not hard for me to. I can step outside my body and look at my life as a beautiful life, and I don't care what other people say. I hold no allegiance to anybody but Stephen Philip Lindquist, and that's about it. And that's who I've always protected, Stephen Philip Lindquist. And it's not a selfish thing. It isn't. It's because, Stephen Philip Lindquist did have an amazing life and still does. And it proves that his humanity, or my own humanity, is worth saving. There's people in the world that are beautiful people. And they don't have to be pretty on the outside. They have inner beauty and inner strength. And yes, of course, there's beautiful people on the outside that are amazing. It's just hard for some people to see that. It's hard for people to get outside their own narrow minded perspective and see that. It's because they're afraid. And that's the truth. It's not that they're afraid of the knowledge. They're afraid of making the change within themselves. When people hold on to certain beliefs, and I'll tell you that's why I spent my life learning about other people's beliefs, or at least experiencing them, going to their, you know, not that I did a lot of study in it, but I talked to just regular people about their feelings about it. And I helped so many of them. I don't know. Then I get back to that same question: should I have even bothered? You know. And sometimes I'm like, look what good it did you. Look where you are. You know. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they're using you, Stephen. Of course not. It's it's strange. It's strange. So it's strange what I stand accused of. And it's strange what others don't know about me, about Stephen, that he's not telling you. He doesn't have to tell me. It is, though, a little bit odd sometimes. You know, I don't know. So, well, maybe I've said enough again. I just want you to think about that. Think about what is the purpose of fighting. There's really none. Especially since you're all the same people or beings. And I know somebody's angry. And it isn't Stephen. I know, and it's right. I can contain that anger most of the time. I just wonder sometimes what would happen if it got out. Keep it well shielded and guarded. You don't have to believe that either, unless you want to. I don't know. I said one time it's somebody else's battle and war that I'm here for, not even my own. Roped into something. I'll tell you about a movie that I saw once. It's a children's movie. I saw it as a child, except it's really not a children's movie. And we watched it in school. Watership Down. It's kind of a scary movie. Not, I mean, it's an animated movie, but the idea behind it goes to a larger scale. And like I said before, sometimes messages are hidden in movies. Not mine. I'm not hiding any messages. If somebody's tampering with them, yes, I do say things that mean other things for a particular reason. Or maybe my context is taken differently. Or maybe I don't enunciate words in the right frame of reference. Okay. And this guy is here too. I don't know. You tell him. Felix, you tell him. Yeah. You just look at him and say, "Ah." You won't say that. So, anyways. Anyways, I'll talk more later.